Hello, English 11 students. Let's take a look at how to write your rhetorical paragraph on the cell phone article. So this box right here essentially lays out step by step, sentence by sentence, what you need to include in your paragraph. Let's look at sentence 1. This is your topic sentence. So this is where you're going to include the direction you chose about the author's use of logos, pathos, or ethos. So remember that logos is logic or facts, pathos is the emotional appeal or personal connection, and ethos is that trustworthiness and credibility. So in order to write this paragraph, you will also need your commenting tools article. If you don't have that open, you'll need to open it up. It's this one right here with the comments and then the chart at the bottom. So for my topic sentence, I could use this as my sentence starter. And then I would just plug in which rhetorical device that I chose. So I could say the authors are effective in their use of logos or pathos or ethos. Or I'm going to give you another sentence starter that you could use as well. So take a look at the bottom here. So here's the sentence starter that you could use. In the article, having your cell phone nearby takes a toll on your thinking. The authors use blank to explain the impact smartphones have on people's experiences. So I am going to use pathos because that's what I included on my chart here. So this is the chart you filled out yesterday or last week. I chose pathos as my one rhetorical device that I was going to focus on. So that's the emotional appeal. So that's what I'm going to plug into my first sentence here, my topic sentence. So in the article, having your cell phone nearby takes a toll on your thinking. The authors use pathos to explain. The authors use, sorry, my computer froze for a second. The authors use pathos to explain the impact smartphones have on people's experiences. So if you wanted to use that as your topic sentence as well, you certainly could. You would just need to plug in which rhetorical device you chose here based on what you put into the chart. So I chose pathos. If you chose logos or ethos, you would plug that in right there. So sentence 2, if you look up here, this is where you give a transition and your first example or quote or reference to the article. So I'm going to say something like, one example of this occurs when the authors, and notice I'm using authors as plural because we have multiple authors on this article. We have 4 authors. So that's why I'm using the plural here. So one example of this occurs when the authors, and then I'm going to look at my chart here. So I'm just going to kind of work my way down. This is going to be my first example. In this explanation, I talk about imagery. So I think I'm going to use that in my sentence here. So one example of this occurs when the authors reference imagery in the following quote. So I'm going to use a colon to offset my quote. Then I'll go over here to my chart. I will highlight this, copy it, and now I'm going to paste it into my paragraph. So you might have to check for formatting. And I'm going to see if I can take these hyperlinks off. So if I click on the hyperlink and then over here I click remove link, it'll take that off. I don't want that on here for my essay. So one example of this occurs when the authors reference imagery in the following quote. Even if we are actively engaged in a conversation, we will turn our heads when someone says our name across the room. Similarly, parents automatically attend to the sight or sound of a baby's cry. So I've used a transition, right? For number 2, it says transition. So that's one example. And then I've referenced my quote here. So now I'm going to look at sentence 3. This is where I need to explain example 1 and tell the readers why it's effective, right? Why is the author's use of pathos effective here? How does it play into the overall argument of the article? So I'm going to go back to my chart, and I wrote this out here already, right? This affects the author's argument because the imagery being used makes the problem relatable to readers. So I'm going to copy that, Control C. I'm going to go over here and paste that into my paragraph. So the font is different. I'm going to change that at the very end when I'm done. So this affects is one of the sentence starters, right? This affects, this affects. So I'm using that and I'm explaining how that this quote is effective. So now I'm going to look at sentence 4 and I'm just kind of going to repeat the process. So transition, phrase, example number 2 with a reference to the article. So for my transitional phrase, I could say something like, a second example of pathos occurs. So that's what I'm going to type here. A second example of pathos occurs in the article when, and I'm going to look at my chart. So here's my quote. And then in my explanation, I talk about powerful language. So I could either in this explanation here, I could say a second example of pathos occurs in the article when referencing powerful language, or I could just launch right into the quote. So I think I'm going to do that this time to make it a little different than what I did before. So I'm going to highlight my quote, Control C to copy. I need to offset my quote with a comma, and then I'll paste that in there. I need to put my quotation marks in. So at the beginning and the end here, I'm going to take off the hyperlinks. So click on them, and then you'll have this option to remove. All right, let me read this through and see if it flows. A second example of pathos occurs in the article when, think about the number of fatalities associated with driving while talking on the phone or texting, or of texting while walking. So that sounds a little abrupt there. I think I'm going to add to this. A second example of pathos occurs in the article when the authors reference or mention fatalities. And then I'm going to use a colon here, I think, instead of a comma. So now I've got my quote. If I look at sentence 5, I need to explain my quote and why it's effective. So again, if you've completed the chart, you've already done that. So I'm going to go to my chart here. I'm going to highlight this, copy it, Control C. I'm going to paste it into my article. And I don't want that box there, so I'm going to do undo. And I need to just highlight the words. There we go. That should work better. Okay, so again, I'm going to change the font at the end here so that it's all the same. So this affects the author's argument by using the word fatalities as powerful language to catch the reader's attention and convey the seriousness of the problem. So the only thing I'm going to change here, I said this affects the author's argument here. So I'm going to use a different transition phrase. I'm going to just highlight this one. This enhances the author's argument. I'm going to copy it, Control C. I'm going to replace it here just to add some sentence variety to my writing. So then I'll look at sentence 6 and again, go through the same process. So I need a transition and then I'll go right into my quote. So, so far for my transitions, I've said one example, a second example, and now I'll maybe do the final example of the author's use of pathos happens when, and now I need to look at my quote here. So this is my quote. Think about the last time you went to the movies or went out with friends, read a book, or played a game. Was your smartphone close by? In all of these cases, merely having your smartphone present may have impaired your cognitive functioning. So I'm going to highlight that, copy it so I can paste it in. So I'm going to paste, and then I need to include quotation marks because this is taken directly from the article. And then I need to make sure it flows. So the final example of the author's use of pathos happens when I could say something like when they address the readers directly. So when they address the reader directly. And I'll use a colon to offset my quotation here. So that's sentence 6. I have my transition, the final example, and I have my quote itself. So now I need to explain the quote and why it's effective, and that's easy because I already did it in the chart. So I'm going to highlight this, copy it, Control C, paste it here. This affects the author's argument because the authors are making a personal connection to the reader by asking him or her direct questions. So what I'm going to do is just use a different sentence starter so it's not repetitive. So I haven't used this one yet. This solidifies the author's point of view. I'm going to copy that, and I'm just going to replace it here. So this solidifies. Now I have more than one author, so I need to move this apostrophe to the end. This solidifies the author's point of view because I'm going to say they, so it's not repetitive, because they are making a personal connection to the reader by asking him or her direct questions, period. Okay, last sentence here is a transitional sentence and a concluding statement. So essentially for this, I'm going to restate my topic sentence, just using different words. So I think maybe I'll start off, it is clear that the author's use of pathos is effective to explain how cell phones impact a person's thought process. Okay, so now I'm finished. I'm going to change my font so everything is the same. So I'm going to, I'm going to change it to Times New Roman 12. So now everything's uniform. I'm going to indent my first paragraph here. And now all I have to do is look through this to check for grammar. So let's take one final look. In the article, having your cell phone nearby takes a toll on your thinking. The authors use pathos to explain the impact smartphones have on people's experiences. One example of this occurs when the authors reference imagery in the following quote. Even if we are actively engaged in a conversation, we will turn our heads when someone says our name across the room. Similarly, parents automatically attend to the sight or sound of a baby's cry. This affects the author's argument because the imagery being used makes the problem relatable to readers. A second example of pathos occurs in the article when the authors mention fatalities. Think about the number of fatalities associated with driving while talking on the phone or of texting while walking. This enhances the author's argument by using the word fatalities as powerful language to catch the reader's attention and convey the seriousness of the problem. So one little error I caught here, we have multiple authors, so the apostrophe should go after the S. The final example of the author's use of pathos happens when they address the readers directly. Think about the last time you went to the movies or went out with friends, read a book, or played a game. Was your smartphone close by? In all of these cases, merely having your smartphone present may have impaired your cognitive functioning. This solidifies the author's point of view because they are making a personal connection to the reader by asking him or her direct questions. It is clear that the author's use of pathos is effective to explain how cell phones impact a person's thought process. So I used this as my template. I used the sentence starters here, and I used my chart to write this paragraph. So if you've completed the commenting tools assignment and you've completed the chart at the end, this shouldn't be too difficult to put together. All you're really doing is coming up with your topic sentence, your concluding statement, and you're putting what's in the chart together with the sentence starters in this box. So if you have any questions about this assignment, this rhetorical paragraph, please do not hesitate to reach out to me and ask questions. You can watch this video as many times as you need to walk you through this step by step. And good luck on your paragraph this week. I can't wait to read them.